Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:30 p.m. I submit David Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access Channel's recording. Is there anyone else here recording the meeting? We will do roll call in alphabetical order. Bill Bontempi. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Lisa Murray. Here. Rick Tredeker.
Here.
Mike Terabasi.
Here.
Michelle Boudreaux. Aye. Here. If you would please stand, Mike will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we will begin with our student rep. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure. My name is Elena Bergeron. I am a sophomore here at Utah.
Can you move closer to the microphone so we can hear you?
Oh yeah, here, Elena. Just move your extension. Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
If you didn't hear that, my name is Elena Bergeron. I'm a sophomore here at Minnetonka. There is a lot going on, so I have a few notes here. Minnetonka is very busy, especially in the fall. We have so many events coming up, including homecoming, which is one of our biggest events ever. Today, student council met and we were preparing. We hung up some posters for homecoming. We are preparing for DJ and dance and football game, and we are getting very excited for that. Our theme this year is neon, and everybody is very pumped. So, going on the student council, we recently ran the Scarecrow event at Rice Fruit Farm. We made very good profit. We had a great turnout. We ended up running out of supplies because we had so many people show up. We had so many volunteers and went very smoothly. It was very nice. ATI Club recently did a car wash. There was a bunch of profit from that as well. They had a great turnout. We ended up bonding, even though it wasn't a very nice day out. Everyone had a lot of fun. It was a great time. And one of the biggest things that was happening this week was the freshman election for student council. The results got posted yesterday afternoon, and the freshmen are very excited to get started in student council. We have our first GA with them, which is General Assembly next week. We are very excited to meet them all and get them involved. It is very important to be involved here at Minnetonka, and there is so much going on, and we are very excited for the rest of the year to come.
Elena, could you tell us a little bit about yourself other than you're a sophomore? Like, why are you involved in the student council? Because you could use the we.
Of course. I am pretty new to student council. I was very excited to join. It is a great community, and I was hesitant to join at first because my friends were saying it's a very big commitment, and I'm so glad I made that commitment. I have so many friends. I'm enjoying it so much. I love the volunteer work. I love talking to people, and that's kind of just who I am, and I'm really enjoying it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Elena, when is the homecoming dance? Do the date?
Yes. Homecoming dance is the 20th of October. Ticket sales start next week and end on the 17th.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to new business. We are going to hear from John DeRoja about the Wilbraham Middle School field trip to DC. Thank you. Take care.
Works. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So I am here again, seems like annually now, to ask for your approval to pursue and continue planning for an 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C., which we have tentatively scheduled, if you approve, for June 9th through June 12th. That would mean leaving on a Sunday and coming back on a Wednesday, which is a little bit different than we've done before. It's 3 days out of school instead of 4. But I think that's probably a good thing. We also selfishly want to schedule it after June 7th, since Jill Samani, who's organizing it, and myself both have seniors graduating. We weren't going to miss that, so that's a big part of Last year when I came to you all, I was concerned with the cost. Last year's cost was $1,183 per student, which starts to and actually is pretty well in the middle of unreachable for some families. So it's our responsibility to be thoughtful about that. So we've potentially contracted with a new company called HWRSD. I believe that's in your packet. It's owned by World Strides, which we've used previously. Jill Samani used to work for HWRSD, so she has some connections there as well. But the cost, we haven't settled on the cost yet because we're kind of working on some scholarship opportunities for kids who can't access. But we're looking at $200 to $300 less than last year's trip. So it makes it more accessible to more of our kids. Some of the breakdown from last year, so we had 110 Wilbraham Middle School kids go out of 195. We had 16 of those students were low-income students, so roughly 15% of our low-income population went. So that's not quite equitable, but we'd like to see that change with some opportunities for the PTO to manage some fundraising opportunities like they did last year, and to drop the cost and to create some scholarship opportunities. So that's it in a nutshell. It is there's some great things about what we did last year, having gone for the first time last year. There's some things we would change. There's some places we probably wouldn't go again. But there are some sort of non-negotiables that I have, and one is certainly the Museum of African American History and Culture and the Holocaust Museum, both. We weren't able to get tickets that met our schedule for the Holocaust Museum last year. That's certainly something that I keep pushing and would like for our kids to experience. Any questions?
Is this a plane ride down or a bus ride?
It's a bus ride.
Bus ride.
Yep.
And on that one day with all those museums, I take a bunch of kids occasionally to Washington too.
Yep.
And is this just driving by the front of these museums? You have one day of all those museums, American history,
Yep.
Holocaust, and we spent like a day at a museum.
Yeah, I think there's some room for improvement with, with some of these are drive-bys, they're photo ops, right? But some of them, I think you'd be surprised. What my surprise was last year was the amount of kids that were disengaged in some of the museums themselves. The amount of different schools that are there and kids running around museums is foreign to me, but definitely a reality. And a lot of our kids, taking a few minutes and then going to corners of the museum and getting on their phones with their friends.
Yeah, and things like the African history, which is a phenomenal museum.
Our kids did great there.
It's historical. I mean, it takes like 3 or 4 hours to get through. Holocaust, 3 or 4 hours to get through.
Yep.
And the other one that's not in here is they have a brand new exhibit at the Smithsonian with the actual planes that the Wright brothers flew. I mean, each one of those is a half a day. And the only other thing was that the tickets are like $1 ahead of time. You can reserve a time or free. It depends upon what the museum is for all of those. You can do like months ahead. And the other thing is, Richie
You
Nito.
can't for the Holocaust Museum, you can't. They're harder to get, especially with 125 kids.
Anyway, we had a good time. Yeah, Richie Nito got us over on the floor of the house and the whole behind-the-scenes thing. So it's supposed to just go on the standard tour. If you contact him, who knows what you can get.
Sure, that's a great idea. I do think there are things on here in their standard itinerary. Last year, I don't believe Mount Vernon was a great experience for our kids. It's kind of a walkthrough, but it's way out of the way. The hotel we stayed at last year was about a 40 to 45-minute drive outside of DC. This year they're proposing Alexandria, which is much closer. So there's some things that we definitely like about this, but there are some areas we could definitely tweak and change for sure.
Is there anything that you need from us other than approval?
No, I think that's it. I think, we'll do the legwork of making sure that it's accessible to as many kids as possible. I mean, anytime we go anywhere, there's risk, right? But overnight for 4 days in DC, there's even more risk. It's not a very calm city oftentimes. So just managing that and understanding that, we'll handle things as they come and report back if there's things that we need to know.
Only one last thing for trips. It's like counterintuitive, is that everybody gets to all these museums first thing in the morning, you know, right when they open up, and all the kids are there. If you go the last few hours of the day right before it closes, you have ordering list to yourself, and the kids are gone, everybody's back, they're too tired, so they sleep late, go and take the end of the day.
Yeah, we tended to do the Jefferson at night and try to do some outside stuff. The Roosevelt mine is great.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
So we vote on this? May I have a motion?
I'd like to vote that we move to approve the proposed trip to Washington DC for the Wilbraham Middle School.
Second.
Any questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you, John. If anything does come up, just let us know. Thank you.
We are going to move on to the discussion of the Inspector General's letter to the MSBA. Aaron.
So, if you've read the letter, we are the exemplar for cautions regarding smart technology and proprietary systems in new school building. This letter actually did come as a bit of a surprise. We hadn't heard anything back in a while from the IG's office. We sort of received this out of the blue. We did follow up and ask if they were continuing to pursue civil recovery on our behalf, and they indicated they are not. So the end of the road for this at the moment is that we are the caution for other school districts and MSTA.
Any comments or questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We'll move on to the subcommittee updates. We'll start with the curriculum subcommittee. Lisa?
There's no update.
Okay. We will move on to the planning committee. So I'm going to defer to Aaron and John. So we'll begin with a review and discussion of the DESI feedback on regional agreement and school committee consent to have legal counsel prepare updated draft agreement.
Okay, thank you. So as was reported to the committee last spring, the planning committee did have a meeting at which members of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education were present to discuss the process of modifying the regional agreement. At that meeting, we've received some verbal guidance about changes that would be required to the regional agreement in order for it to become effective. Just as a reminder for members of the public that it takes really 4 parties to change the regional agreement. You need the school committee, the 2 towns, and the commissioner. And so the DESI staffers were really on the meeting with us in order to talk about things that the commissioner would require in order to change the agreement. And most of these are just changes to reflect things that have changed in the legislative or regulatory landscape since the time the regional agreement was first adopted. We asked for sort of detailed markup, and they spent several months reviewing this. As you can see, we have an extremely detailed review of the agreement from 2 members of the department. And so I'm not going to go through the scores of comments here in detail, but I will point out some of the more salient points. First, in the preamble, right away, one issue that was being discussed in the context of our regional agreement and different options we have was the issue of preschool. Preschool is not currently in the agreement, and so we felt that there was some flexibility with what we could do. We've been advised that since preschool is included in the district profiles, any changes to the agreement will need to update the regional agreement to say that preschool is an included grade. Next, in section 1, it was pointed out that the current practice of electing new board members in the spring and then not having them take office until the beginning of the next fiscal year and the first meeting of July really needs to include notice to the voters on the ballots that although they're voting for members now, the members won't take their office immediately. Indicating, I think, that the agreement should state that if that's the practice we're going to continue to use, that we want to provide notice to the voters that it's a delayed assumption of responsibilities by new members. Another issue in section 1 is the one person, one vote principle. I actually had a great deal of conversation about this. It's important that representation on the regional committee be proportional to the voters or maybe the citizens in the member communities. And there are different ways in which the regional committee can achieve the one person, one vote principle. One is by simply having different amount of members from each community. Another is weighting the votes. There's a third method, which is holding a district-wide vote. That is something I think is probably a conversation for another day, but just wanted to point out that that would be a required change in the regional agreement. Moving on next to section 4. This is the beginning of some comments and recommendations and requirements around capital costs. One issue is that right now we have language in here that talks about the responsibility for buildings owned, but doesn't talk about responsibility for debt service. So adding that will be important. Also in that section, the only building that's noted as a regional district building right now is Minnechaug. And the question is, are we sure there are no other capital buildings or properties that should belong to the region? As I was thinking of this, the one thing I thought of that might be sort of excluded from that is our current shop, which is located on the campus of Minnechaug, but isn't Minnechaug itself. So that may be something to address in a new agreement. And then there is the apportionment of operating costs. There's language here, and I think this came up in our budget discussions last year, that the agreement has to say that we'll follow the statutory method. If there's an additional method or an alternate method that we want to follow as well, we can also include that here. But in the event that there is an agreement on both towns on an alternate method, then it defaults to the statutory method. So that would be a requirement of the new agreement. Then in section 6, the admission or withdrawal of towns, there are several points where the language would need to be updated to recognize the commissioner's office role, because not only are the member towns responsible for admitting or withdrawing from the region, the commissioner likewise would have to be also in agreement to add new towns or subtract new towns, or subtract existing towns from the region. There's also a comment in here that if one of the member towns did go through a process of exiting with the permission of the other town and the commissioner, and there were no other towns involved at that time, there wouldn't be a regional agreement anywhere. So that should probably be added. In budget, again, there's a few things here. One is that we're currently following a timeline that is accelerated according to what's required by the regulation. So the comment here is that providing the budget by April 1st is not a statutory or regulatory requirement, and we may want to think about defaulting to what's required, which is April 30th. Also, there are several labels of the chart of accounts that have just changed since the time, the chart of accounts that was in existence when the regional agreement was first made. So those would be just updates to what they're currently called. And then finally, noting that Memorial Elementary is still in the regional agreement, TWB is still in the original agreement, and if we're changing the agreement, as we had indicated to the Department of Education we have an interest in doing, then those schools should be removed. So that's the feedback we received in a nutshell, and one thought I would offer sort of on behalf of the Planning Committee is that even though we have some sort of larger issues that we still need to iron out, there are a number of these things that are just bookkeeping, for lack of a better term, and it might be advisable at this point to approve some legal fees for the school committee's legal counsel to begin preparing an updated draft with the parts that can be changed now and the parts that just are purely regulatory, so that when we fill in the blanks with the other more substantive decisions that the committee would need to make, we have a document that's ready to go and are not then faced with another delay of preparing a regional agreement.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I feel like a relic in that I was involved in the original agreement 30 years ago. It's unbelievable. Not that I remember very much about it, but one of the things I do remember, just for background, there were 3 school committees. There was a Wilbraham School Committee, a Camden School Committee, and the Camden-Wilbraham Regional School Committee for the high school only. And what we did is we voted to merge. There was a lot of people. I can't remember how many were in each one, maybe 5, 7 or 9, I think, at one time. If you added us all, it's like 17 people. And so we voted to merge because the state gave us a deadline, it was a really quick one. They got all these extra millions of dollars if you merged into one regional district. And so we weren't in time constraint to vote for it, otherwise we'd lose all these extra millions of dollars, which is how we ended up voting for it. But the only comment I have here, the little stuff I just heard, was the one person, one vote. Certainly Hamden, being from the Menard district, if you just said we're going to open up to just all at large, Hamden might have nobody involved. That was a big thing. And certainly the U.S. Senate doesn't have one person, one vote either, per se, in the United States. So I don't know how careful we have to be with that one person, one vote. Another thing is representation. Try to make it approximately according to the population, but you can never get exact in anything like that. So there's a little bit of history for some of the things that we went through and some of the speed that we had to put the original agreement on. And yes, after 30 years, everything needs modification and updating.
What percentage of is the Wilbraham-Camden split for this year?
We actually brought that information to the last school committee, so let me just go back and look at my notes.
I think I remember it was 19% and 81%.
79 point some and yeah, 21 or 20 point something. It's
Back in the day, I'm pretty much sure it was 75-25 approximately.
Back getting right around the 80-20 right now.
Yeah, for some reason I thought it was 81-19 as well. So we are at 70, so that's gone down.
I would have to look.
Last year I think it was 80.
I may not be.
So if it was the 81-19, what had me worried was you'd basically have to have 9 people from Wilbraham and 2 from Hamden for that one vote thing.
I'm sorry, just as a clarification on that, that's not based on student enrollment, that's based on the population of the towns.
Oh, great. Oh, good. Good.
So I had a question on this, and probably the planning committee's already dealt with it, and I just don't know. I mean, obviously there's talk about regionalizing at the middle school level, and there's probably a physical plant building somewhere in our school district that will become the regional middle school. Should that building then not become the property of the school district? Because it would, like, for instance, if Wilbraham Middle School became Minnechaug Regional Middle School, I don't think it would be fair for that to remain the property of Wilbraham, because they'll be solely responsible for the capital needs of the building, versus both Camden and Wilbraham sharing the capital needs.
Yeah, we do actually speak to that in, so one of the documents you have is a cost summary. In one of the appendices, it talks about that, and it talks about what are some possible options to address that. So one might be to fully regionalize the building. Another might be to adopt a fee structure. Another might be to work out some sort of ratio based on student counts and things like that. You know, obviously, if it were Wilbraham Middle School that became that building, you know, ownership would remain. If ownership remained with Wilbraham, you know, it wouldn't necessarily. It would be hard to say it was an exact split, right? Because the ownership of the building remains with, but there would have to be some agreement to how that might be split properly.
I would recommend that we keep going through, because a lot of things we presented and answered for you as we keep on going through the planning committee information. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, that was the only question I had.
Cool. You'll have some more in a couple minutes.
Does anyone else have any questions? So we'll move on to the survey. Oh, yeah. So we do need to vote on whether or not we want to have Sean Sweeney begin modifying the agreement.
I make a motion to have council for the school committee begin making the changes to update the regional agreement.
Second.
Questions or discussion?
Yes. Do we just want to give it to the attorneys, or do we want to have a school committee member be involved with those changes to report back to the school committee any issues or anything?
Could we have him consult with the administration just at this phase? These were the recommendations of Bessie, because there'll be other modifications that will be phased in later. But I think maybe at this point, I feel that having the attorney work with the administration is appropriate.
That's fine with me.
Do we vote on the different issues afterwards? I do think that, I haven't time to think about it or discuss too much, that if we had one person, one vote, we wouldn't have the United States now. That's why the little towns, the little states got shoved aside. So that's why they had the compromise with the Senate, where he has 2 senators, and then you have the House of Representatives. So then it kind of, you get somewhat proportional, you know, maybe it's not exactly one person, one vote, but the little guys have a little more say, per se. They don't get totally shoved out and nobody hears from them. So anyway, that's just one thing when you try to make it perfect, one person, one vote.
The discussion is going to be a lot deeper than that. Remember, the regional agreement, any change to the regional agreement has to be ratified by any other towns. So, you know, noting, you know, that concern, I'm sure there's others that have other concerns within the changes. What was recommended through DESI seemed reasonable, at least for now. When we get into talking about a portion of the cost within the member towns, we've talked about that for years. We also have to, we do seriously have to discuss the regionalization of the middle school building, which I am just vehemently opposed to. I think that would be a big mistake. We're having a hard enough time getting capital needs covered in this building. We're going to add another building. So I would say that we need to work on some sort of structure, but I think that's, you know, laying an egg twice.
And I believe the one person, one vote is a Massachusetts law. Is that correct?
That's correct. But just the original question, I think, was, would we decide some of these other more weighty issues later? That was sort of the sense of what I was recommending. I think Sean could do a lot to prepare potential successor documents, sort of with blanks left for how we want to deal with things like the middle school, how we want to deal with one person, one vote. There are different options, but we know they will have to be addressed, so they could just be sort of blank spaces in the agreement at this point until the committee has an opportunity to deliberate those.
And that was Sean Sweeney, not Sean Kennedy.
Correct.
I think that's a really great statement, John, especially because I don't think we want to waste time deliberating some stuff that might not even be legal to do. Right? So it would be great if the attorney comes back with multiple choice of things that are actual possibilities. So,
Okay, so we will do our vote. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
of the planning committee survey data.
Thank you again. So at the end of the last school year, the planning committee asked me to conduct a survey of the school community in addition to the meetings that took place over the summer that I reported on at an earlier meeting. So we did receive a large number of responses immediately when this went out, even though it was, I believe, either the day school ended or the day after school ended. We left the survey open through the summer because I did reference it at the community meetings I had, and we did have principals make another push to get responses in the fall, and we did get some more. But I would say most of these came in initially when the survey went out, as a member of our planning committee expected would be the case. In total, we had 270 responses from the school community. These included responses from both Hamden and Wilbraham, as well as from caregivers and employees from all of our schools. Just over 60% of those who responded were Wilbraham residents, 20% were from Hamden, and 20% were from other communities. About 2/3 were parents or caregivers, and about 1/3 were district employees. Among the parent caregiver group, we had people with children at all of the schools. So when you look at how the responses broke down, most of the responses were received from families or employees connected with the middle school. I should say most of them, but the largest number were from people connected to the middle school. We had 99. Although we did have responses from all schools, the range was a low of 4 at TWB, up to the high of 99 at the middle school. We had a section on the survey where we asked about facility usage and whether people felt the school they were most connected to was either underutilized or overcrowded or just right. We had 26% who felt that utilization was just right. We had 1/3 who said that the school that they were connected with was either underutilized or overcrowded. And we had 16% who said that they had more than one condition. That could be a person who was an employee at a school they felt was underutilized, who had a child who was enrolled in a school that they felt was overcrowded. We also asked about support for modification of the regional agreement. We did include in there the fact that at the time there were a very small number of students enrolled in middle school grades in Hamden, so that might have pushed things a little bit. But we did have just over 80% of the respondents say they were in favor of modifying the regional agreement. And support was strong among all of the groups. It was most popular among residents of Hamden, 90% of whom said the agreement should be changed, and support was lowest among residents of Wilbraham, where 77% felt the agreement was changed. But in all of these cases, we're talking about overwhelming numbers in support. 85% of those residing in other communities, who are mostly employees in our district, felt the agreement should be changed. And then we also looked at support for modification to the regional agreement among different stakeholder groups. There was a small group that identified with some other kind of school affiliation. We had asked for parents of students, we'd asked for employees, but then there were also some people who said, well, I'm just an alumni or I'm a concerned family member. That was a small number, I think like 3 or 4 people in that group, but 100% of them felt the agreement should be changed. 94% of the school employees who responded said they felt the agreement should be changed. 79% of parents and caregivers felt the agreement should be changed. Among those who were opposed to changing the agreement, the most common reason cited was concern about the appropriateness of having 8th graders in the same school as other students. That was a theme that also came up in my community meetings. We also asked for preference among the 4 options that the planning committee had narrowed it down to. As you can see, among those 4 options, option 1 was had the plurality of support, with 42% of individuals or respondents indicating support for option 1. Option 2 had 18.5%, option 3 had 10%, option 4 had 9%. There was a group of about 21% who felt that none of the options were advisable. That group was heavily represented by the same group of people who was opposed to changes in the agreement. And I think that group also had a lot of overlap with people who were concerned about having 8th grade in high school. So overall, I think there was a lot of support for modifying the agreement among all stakeholder members of the school community. Whether parents, employees, or community members, it was not a big divide between the 2 communities. There was support among both communities, and again, among people who were from other communities, mostly the employees. The issue that is sort of the sticking point for those who are not in favor, for the most part, is 8th grade in the high school. Have been asked by members of the public, why were there no other options? And I have, if you go back into the history of the planning committee, there were ways of doing that, but the issue was it would result in a 1-grade school. For example, you could do it by putting all of the 6th graders at TWB, but then you're transitioning them all for 1 year and then transitioning them back. You could do the same thing with all 8th graders, or conceivably all 7th graders. The planning committee made a decision early on that it was not in the students' best interest to have a 1-grade school. There are already concerns about, just 2 grades in the school and the number of transitions that created. We didn't want to make it any worse, and that's the reason why there aren't any options for 8th grade, other than 8th grade being at the high school. So those were the results of the survey.
Any questions or comments?
When you have a survey, I was wondering if you have 60% of the people didn't like option 1, 40% did approximately, but do you ever have ranked choice voting or second choice? It would be interesting to know. Let's say the people that said none had to vote for the choices, what they voted for. And so once you sit there and start eliminating some of them, what would the majority actually say to get to a majority, like the way Maine does ranked choice voting or something like that, so you really know what it is. And also, what's the validity of the survey with the number? Usually these surveys have a plus or minus 5%, 10%, whatever, statistical reliability.
So I would say, to the first point, we didn't consider ranked choice voting. I do think that has come up several times in this discussion, and maybe something we want to keep in mind moving forward. In terms of statistical validity, that's based on having a random sampling of voters, and this was not a random sample. This was a sample of individuals who responded. So I wouldn't make any statistical claims about it. I would point out, though, that really the sample that matters will be the sample that comes to the town meetings when the votes take place. So it's hard to know what that makeup will be.
So I appreciate all the work that you guys have done with the community outreach and surveys. The question that I have is to basically the 4 of you sitting here in front of us tonight, and that is, we're talking about building utilization, we're talking about concerns about 8th grade, we're talking about a lot of different things. The question I have for the 4 of you is, what is the best way to educate our children? Like, if we had to remove all constraints, get rid of the regional agreement, just take the buildings that we have, take the population that we have, what would give our students the best outcome? Because I feel like as we're doing this, I feel like we're sort of deciding what hotel we're going to stay at and haven't figured out what our destination is going to be. And I want to make sure that it's a pivotal point in this district's history, because this is going to determine the education of students moving forward for possibly another 30 years. And so I don't want to get 3 years into a plan and say, oh geez, we should have done this. Educationally, if you removed all barriers, what would be your ideal situation?
Thanks for the question. I think I'll let my colleagues respond first. 'Cause I know what my answer is.
And I'm interested because I want to make sure that the paths that we're taking are consistent with what we feel would provide best educational practices for all the students in the district.
So Lisa, why don't we start with you? From the instructional curriculum standpoint.
That was one of the topics of conversation between teachers about the benefits of having a different, especially at the elementary level, that fewer transitions, but that would mean less opportunities for collaboration across grade levels. So that was kind of like, it was hard to decide which would be better. I mean, I think it's hard to say, well, if we didn't have any constraints, like, does that mean we can build new buildings and say, but so.
No, based on what we have.
Based on what we have.
Yep.
Based on what we have, I feel like it's important to reduce the overcrowding and give students the space and the opportunities to learn in that way, and to reduce the transitions as much as we possibly can. And I think, for me, we have the buildings that we have, and I feel like the option to move 8th grade provides great opportunity also for our 8th grade students, and maintaining, working on those, lessening the impact of transitions by having a better curriculum and really being very aggressive in our professional development and supporting teachers in that way.
So I agree with everything that Lisa said. I love the idea of 8th grade coming to Minichog. I think creating an 8th grade academy would offer a lot of opportunities to our students. I love the idea of Wilbraham Middle School only being 2 grades. I think it's extremely overcrowded, and that's not helpful to students. I think that just having 2 grades there would offer a lot more opportunity. I'm a fan of option 1 or 2. I think that for special education, option 2 does provide more flexibility for separate programs, because you're able to offer programming that spans more than just 2 grade levels. But I do understand Lisa's point about being able to have all of the same grade in the building for collaboration. So options 1 or 2, I think are both viable options for us as a district. The only, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you, would there be any other, like I'm saying, like removing all the constraints that we have, right? If we're going to go in and we're going to modify the regional agreement, we can modify it to anything that we want. So,
but don't miss the buildings, because we can't change the buildings. So in this thought exercise, we're constrained by the buildings that we have, but by nothing else. Come on, Bill. If it was up to everybody, I think they would have an elementary school building, kind of like a Minichog, a middle school like Minichog, have the 3 different buildings, I think, and then have all the resources and all the students in these buildings. But financially, that's not going to happen.
But I think I said when Lisa asked me, it's working within the buildings that we have.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And but all the other constraints are gone, but they're not gone. That's the issue. We have financial constraints. We have constraints of different member towns. There is no way of looking at this without the constraints, because the constraints are what's going to make what happens happen.
This question, Sean, I think you're missing the point. The question is based on what do we feel is the best for educational efficacy. That's all I'm asking. It's the only thing that I'm asking in this. I'm looking at the buildings that we have, but are there things that we think are more important than others? Because, again, coming down to budget constraints, yes, there's going to be budget constraints every single year, no matter what we do. So if we're going to sort of revamp what we're doing in education in this town, I think the direction that we need to go in is how do we feel the students are going to be best educated? And then that's our destination, and then work from there. Budget constraints will come in second, but if our North Star is always educational excellence, educational excellence in providing the best educational opportunity for our students, then I really think that needs to be the direction that we go in. And that's why I'm asking you, because I'm not an educational expert. All of you are. And I rely on your opinions and your informed opinions as far as what we think is going to work best educationally.
So can I just add, I love the idea of preschool being consolidated and having that located at Green Meadows so that everyone's together and it's a consolidated preschool program. And the last thing is the only issue that I have with option one is that Stony Hill will still be overcrowded. I struggle with how little space they have at Stony Hill to be able to do what would be sound educational practice.
So, I would definitely say that I would defer largely to Lisa and Gina, minimally at the elementary level, in terms of their understanding of elementary education. I did not go through elementary education, I went through it, but I was not an elementary administrator, I was not an elementary teacher. I will speak to maybe some of the apprehensions about 8th grade at the high school. I've worked at multiple districts that had middle high schools that were fairly integrated. You know, they were separate, but there were opportunities for 8th graders and even advanced students. I recall an 8th grader district I worked at who was taking AP calculus. Wonderful opportunity for that student. They had a great time. They were embraced by the high school community. I don't see the same apprehensions that people have, and I would, if it were, you know, within my purview, I would look to try to integrate their schedules a little more fully. You know, I don't think the whole day stays, you know, completely together, and there are some classes you want to think about, but I'm just less apprehensive about it because I think I've seen it in action. I've seen it successful. But I do understand, as a parent, some of the apprehensions. I think when you get concerned about some of the things that 8th graders might see at the high school building, I think you might be surprised at what they see at the middle school building. You know, it's challenging at a lot of levels in those regards.
So I've been on a journey of changing opinions over the process of this. I would say that in the beginning, I would have been more strongly 2, 3, or 4 than a number 1. But I've heard some things that have caused me to change my opinion. Let me explain why. Just going into this, feel that those were stronger educational models. I was very concerned about, and remain very concerned about, the number of transitions in our district. I know that there's a strong body of research that says every time students change schools, they go through some regression. It takes them some time to get back. And we have a lot of transitions in our current setup. I know it's also difficult for parents who have kids. It's almost impossible not to have kids at more than one building if you have more than one child. That's not ideal. However, I've heard 2 things over the course of all these conversations that have persuaded me that number 1 is probably the best that we can achieve within this specific community. And the first is the strong voices of the teachers that Lisa described, really wanting to stay together with their grade level cohorts. I have spoken to the committee many times about the importance of culture, and I think the benefits that might be there in research about reducing transitions will be outweighed if we end up upsetting all of the elementary teachers along the way. You know, most of that research is based on kids that happen to be going to schools that have more transitions, or schools that happen to be going kids that happen to be going to schools with less transitions, not kids who went through a redistricting process to get from more transitions to less transitions. So I'm really concerned about the impact on morale if we were to go with 2, 3, or 4. The other thing that came up in my conversations with community members across the summer was, and even when we were meeting with parents last spring, the tremendous apprehension there is about having twin schools or 3 schools having the same grade levels, that there won't be equity among them. There were issues of sectionality even within Wilbraham that I didn't realize until I started talking to people about concerns about where the line was going to be drawn and what the population to be served by the town, by the schools would be, and whether their children would be in the right school or the wrong school. My understanding is it's those concerns that led the district to sort of get itself into the position that it's in now, and I think those are still very strong, very prominent. I can say this as a superintendent who had 4 elementary schools, and figuring out where to draw that line every year was really tough for where students need to be, and that was without concerns about equity. I think that will alienate a large section of the parent population, and that will cause problems. So based on all of those discussions, I've become an advocate for option number 1. Benefits I see to it are maintaining the morale of our teaching staff, maintaining the ability to train them more feasibly because they're all in the same grade levels with the exception of Green Meadows, and bringing the 8th grade to the high school. I think bringing the 8th grade to the high school is a double win because it allows students to access facilities and programs that they can't currently access at the middle school. And it also allows us to open up the middle school and get kids out of inappropriate spaces. In a few minutes, Aaron's going to present some of the costing out that he did. And thinking about it, I told Aaron I think we made a mistake in that. We didn't put in money for the library, and I think we need to redo that, because one of the things that bothers me as your superintendent is having most of the students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade with no access to a school library because it's all being used for classroom space. And it's been that way for so long, it's not just like we'll take the kids out of there and the library will reappear. I think there needs to be some work around that, and I think it could be a real good community outreach effort in rebranding the school to sort of resurrect the school and the library and then the school's new image, whatever that is. So for those reasons, I would support number 1 as well.
So one final question, going, and I'll direct this to you, John, if anybody wants to chime in, they can. So we talk about the effective transitions on students, and we talk about the position of providing equity. So the question that I have then is, how can you define the educational opportunities between the 2 towns if you have a K through 5 in one building in one town, and then you have multiple transitions in all the schools in Wilbraham? So that's the question that I asked you.
Sure. And I would say that we will be able to provide that because of all the work we've done to get the grade level curriculum aligned. I remember in one of my first meetings here, Patrick Kiernan saying, oh, so what you're saying is a 2nd grade should be a 2nd grade should be a 2nd grade. And that is something that I think we've gotten to. What we can't do is have equity in the middle school because so much of what the middle school experience is the peers, it's the clubs, it's everything that happens in that social space, which we just can't do with the numbers that we have in Green Meadows at this time. But the class level experience is much more self-contained, and we have provided a framework and done a lot of work to bring teachers together so that students are getting the same curriculum and the same educational experiences through grade 5.
But with the transitions?
I would admit that that probably would be a sort of detriment to Wilbraham students because they'd have more transitions to go through. But I still think it's probably the best we can do with all of the feelings and real constraints that exist within the community.
Thanks.
What do you think about a K through 12 change in the agreement versus a 6 through 12? This way, if we had a K through 12, we could send more students from Wilbraham to Green Meadows.
So that is where I think ranked choice voting may come in. I think that the question right now is whether we do it 6 through 12 or K through 12, as you said many times. I think I do think there's apprehension on the behalf of Wilbraham residents thinking that they may be compelled to go to school in Hampton and vice versa. So I think it would be on a question of how we deal with that issue. As it stands, Wilbraham residents can go to Green Meadows. Very few have requested to do that. So I think 6 through 12 is a definite. I think you'll get support for that. 1 through 12, I don't think you get support unless you have a plan saying, okay, these students are going to go. You know, like this is where the line is. In other words, if you say from the Sewell Road part of town, you go to Green Meadows. That's not something, as you know, that we've discussed as a planning committee. I think there might be some benefit just while we're doing this to say K through 12 so that it leaves more options open to us later down the line. But I think that could be politically, explosive.
If you, I think my outside observation would be that if you stay with K through 12, stay with 6 through 12, then I think the equity piece that I just talked about will be less inflammatory. The question then comes in when you go 1 through 12, and then we talk about how we're going to restructure buildings. Now it becomes an issue of the school deciding, for kids going into one school building versus another, and you have 2 different educational models based on the number of transitions. And again, if we're going to revisit this and we're going to restructure the district, I want to make sure that we're taking into account all of those things. Because again, you get one bite of the apple on this. And so I don't want to undershoot and then say, oh geez, we didn't think about that.
I'd like to just chime in too with, when I was principal of Stony Hill, the first year was 2 to 6, and then we changed to 2 to 3. And what I noticed, I thought it would be much more challenging transitions for kids, and instead it was kind of liberating for them because they got to be with all their friends. It was very hard when it was a 2 to 6 because so many kids never saw anybody in that first day that they knew, and they knew everybody at that point. So I think we can look at it from the vantage point of the teachers having a really solid experience of collaboration and sharing the brain, but also the children having a solid experience of socialization.
That's interesting because from my own childhood, in the 1800s, we had Huckleberry Hill School and we had summer school, and we didn't know any of the kids from Huckleberry Hill, and they didn't know us. So when middle school came, it was just strange because you didn't know half the kids that were there and they didn't know you. So, but it got better once you moved along, but yeah.
So looking at the latest demographic data that we have 292 students in Stony Hill. I believe the planned operating capacity for that building is 250. Jeannie had mentioned the overcrowding on that. Still remains a concern, again, because that based on the NESDEC survey that we just had completed and the population extrapolations for the next 10 years, it's not going to go down. It's probably going to go up. So again, I caution us to make sure that we are taking into account not just what's going to happen tomorrow, but what's going to happen 5 years from now and 10 years from now.
Anyone else?
Alrighty. So you'll also have the realignment cost report. I'm going to direct you straight to section 3 rather than go through the entire cost report. We tried doing that with planning committee and it got a little weighty. So what I'd like to say is section 1 is primarily focused on moving and one-time costs. So there will be the cost of moving classrooms around and moving teachers and moving grades, as well as any sort of build-outs of office space and things like that that we talked about needing. Section 2, operating costs and savings. So as we talk about consolidating some things, moving 8th grade here, there will be some additional costs, but there will also be some additional savings as we sort of play things out. So just getting right into it. Option 1. So I did this as a projection for 4 years, and year 4 is really sort of and beyond. So it's each succeeding year. So in year 1, we have some upfront moving costs. We have some operating savings. Though again, those are all lined out in section 1 and section 2. We do have some operating expenses net of school choice. So what we're suggesting is that school choice would be moved out basically in each of the 4 years. That does not mean that at some point we won't be able to revisit that a little bit, but with the move-in of 8th grade, particularly keeping them separate, one of the bigger challenges, not so much the numbers, it's that we're going to move a large number of students in here, and they're going to be largely in an entirely separate program, or a very separate program. So it's not just moving the numbers, it's moving sort of an entire cohort that will be on possibly a different schedule, things like that. So it'll be more self-contained. So again, we can look at choice down the road, but we'd like to get at least through a few years of not planning on taking additional choice students. So total budget impact would be an additional $57,500, right? $57,491. Year 2, we no longer have the moving costs. We have operating savings. We have operating expenses, net of choice. Then we have a choice impact to our budget. So our net budget impact would be a reduction of $218,959. Year 3, again, we have operating savings, we have operating expenses net of choice. Then we have the choice impact for that year. And so we then have budget savings of about $81,259. Year 4 and beyond, so going forward.
Just excuse me, where are you right now?
I'm sorry, section 3, option 1.
Thank you.
Sorry, I apologize. There aren't page numbers, so it does get a little difficult. But if you go to section 3, there's a preamble, and then option 1 is the very next page.
Thank you.
Yep, year 4 and beyond, the same operating savings, operating expenses, choice impact for a net budget impact of year 4 and going forward of an additional $56,041. Again, as we go through this, as we get later on in the cycle, there is the ability to look at choice again, but we don't want to sort of force that. We'd like to make sure that we do the job well. If we're going to move 8th grade in here, we don't want to be under the gun to take additional choice students and bring in the program. So I'll go a little quicker through the next because it's the same sort of setup for all of these. Option 2, year 1, moving costs, $438,150. We have some similar operating savings, similar operating expenses, and the same choice impact, right? And all of these, we are moving 8th grade here, so the choice impact is actually going to be the same in all of these cases. Year 2, again, same savings, same expenses, net impact of $218,959 reduction. Year 3, again, operating savings, expenses choice, a net impact of negative $81,459. And then we get to year 4 and beyond. Again, we get down to $56,041. Very similar to option 1, right? Option 3 is where things begin to change. This involves keeping TWB open. And if you go back to, I want to say section 2 or 3, I can't remember if it's in section 1 or 2 or in, can't remember which section it's in. We do have some disclaimers regarding reopening TWB. TWB has been closed for quite a while. There haven't been some upgrades done to it that have been done in the other schools.
Section 1.
Section 1, sorry. So there would be some costs that we'd have to look at if we were to reopen TWB. So moving costs would be higher. We're moving more around to more places. We would have a little bit more in operating savings, $930,750. Operating expenses, net choice impact stays the same. So we would have a net budget impact of an additional $350,650. So this one has a little bit more upfront. Year 2, once we move the one-time costs out, we have a budget impact of a $223,000 reduction in the budget. Year 3, again, I won't dwell on all the items. We have a net budget impact of an $85,500 reduction. And then year 4 and beyond, we have an increase of about $52,000. As we get into option 4, we have a little bit higher moving costs, very similar operating savings, similar operating expenses, to a net year 1 budget impact of an additional $485,120. Year 2 budget impact of a reduction of $124,530. Year 3, a budget impact of a $12,970 increase. And year 4 and beyond, the budget impact would be a net increase of $150,470. So option 4 does come up as probably the more expensive in the short run and long run. A couple things we wanted to look at also was, you will see at the beginning we talk about the concept. People have asked us, what would be the most impactful thing you could do to move the needle on education in the district? Long term, our consistent answer has been full day pre-K, more pre-K available to students. So you'll see Appendix A is a quick analysis of what that might look like. There would be considerable additional costs. There would be the ability to collect additional fees. So we do collect fees from some of our peer partners. That isn't factored in here. We could look at what that would look like if this was something we were interested in exploring in more detail.
Okay. Just make a comment about that. As Aaron said, that's not only responsive to the discussion we were just having about educational impact and what would be the best thing for students. It also came out as a strong theme in my discussions over the summer. I agree with June that there are a lot of benefits to keeping the preschool together, consolidating in Green Meadows. There is this concern among Wilbraham parents of whether it's really in their interest to have a half-day program, if it means going over to Green Meadows and then, maybe washing a few dishes and then turning around and going back to pick up your kids again. However, they have said also, some of those very same people, that if it was a full-day option, it would be very desirable. So not only is this something that will have tremendous positive educational impact, it'll allow us to do the consolidation that Jean was talking about, and I think it will be well received by parents of young children.
Fair enough. Sorry?
Are you allowed to charge a fee for PK, or it has to.
So yes, we can charge a fee for peer partners, so we can't charge for students who are receiving special education services if it's part of their IEP, but we do receive money from peer partners who would be in the program.
So that would be like regular residents of Hampton, Wilbraham. They go free or they keep be charged?
Hmm?
So residents, public school residents, for full day pre-kindergarten, right?
Yes.
They can be charged.
Yes.
Local residents.
It's the way it currently is.
So Appendix B, these are those regional agreement considerations. You know, the big piece is moving 6 and 7 students, grade 6 and 7 students is the preponderance of the options is where those 6, 7 students reside, whether it's TWB or whether it's Wilbraham Middle School. There would have to be considerations. One town or the other would own that building, and there would need to be some working out of the regional agreement. We provide 3 options, and those are pretty much the 3 options I laid out earlier. So I won't dwell on them. You're welcome to give that a read. Finally, Appendix C just gives a quick explanation of the incremental school choice change over time. So we did in a linear fashion rather than picking individual students, individual numbers of students. But you can see down below there are some enrollment estimates of what this would look like and going forward for grades. Any other questions? Any questions?
I do have a question. I was just waiting for you to get it. So I noticed it's back to section 1, in the implementation plans, or the moving plans, or whatever you want to call it, basically all of them, you have in there the $100,000 for the gazebo, paving, the tables at the Minichog Regional High School courtyard, which we now know was not, at least terribly one we received on initial review from at least Wilbraham Finance. My question is it there because we need extra places for the students because we put more students in the building?
Yes.
Because if it is, then I think it's very important to, that we be prepared to present a detailed reason as to why that improvement at Minichog High School is needed to help accommodate the additional students. Because I think there is at least some common perception growing that it's kind of a nicety, and boy, it'd be nice to do that, but when I saw it in here, it immediately came to my mind, oh, perhaps that was on the 10-year capital plan because we're anticipating the need for the extra students.
So it has been on the capital plan as a bit of a nice to have. If we are bringing this number of new students in with the need to also, in many ways, segregate them. So we have a lot of apprehension about moving 8th graders to the high school. Giving spaces where we can put students for periods of time, particularly arrival, lunch periods, other times like that. Outdoor time, there are classes that will go outdoors from time to time for things. And keeping 8th graders separate from the rest of the high school is important to the community in many ways. So this would be essential for that.
If I could just weigh in on that, I think I'm not a superintendent who sits in his office. I'm up and down this hallway during lunches every single day. And every lunch you'll see tables out in the hallway of kids who can't be in the cafeteria because it's too overcrowded. You'll see this space out here, probably 30 to 50 kids eating their lunch there. That's what the current population. So bringing in 200 more is definitely going to create the need for us to have more options for students at lunch. And I mean, that might actually be a good video or something to create for folks who are wondering about it. It's a scene.
Arrival times would be interesting to do a video of as well.
I guess then the follow-up question is, in New England, does that accomplish the goal? lot of days when it is lovely to sit outside under on a covered patio.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of days during the school year where even under a covered patio, I mean, are there gonna be like windbreak walls, almost like three-season room kind of?
We could look at that. I don't know if you've driven around Wilbraham around bus pickup time and see how many students are in shorts in the middle of January. So there are a lot of students who have no fear of the cold, and I think on only the coldest of cold days would that really be an issue for some of them. Yeah.
I mean, my son, he's only 11, but to get him to wear pants, I take the top and I hold his arms and my wife just attacks him and pulls the pants up. I mean, he only wants shorts, but you know. I remember being, again, a long time ago, always eating outside. Snowing, wherever, we just sit under the awning all the time. Can we have all this information that you presented today from planning, can we have it on the website so that people can view, including the regional agreement and that letter and everything like that? Yeah, that would help with conversation from the community. The other thing is, and this is something, okay, it was brought up at the last meeting that, you know, with the cost of everything and how everything has changed dramatically, and to get someone to come in, if you can get a quote and such, that there was discussion about what our original intent was to be the beginning of the 2025 school year to implement this change. And 2024, 25, right? And it was presented at the last meeting, or the question came up, that maybe 25, 26 would be a better year, a year later. I did say that I think this, if we do delay it, this falls on the shoulders of the planning committee. You know, it took us a lot to get started. Our first meeting was the end of January instead of, you know, in September. And we did not meet that much over the summer. And there were many reasons for all those things. And I just thought that since that was a discussion, I thought that we should bring it up here and hear what members have to say. Is that fair, what I said?
Sure. One of the reasons also for the delay was this would have to be brought to the towns at the springtime meeting, and the time for everyone to be able to execute the construction, the coordination and scheduling from the town meeting in May to the beginning of the school year in August didn't seem feasible.
So, if I'm not mistaken, it was just about a year ago to the date that we approved the strategic plan. And one of the things that I said at that time was we really needed to hit the ground running. I'm extremely disappointed. I understand, but at the same time I'm disappointed because we have had this for an entire year. This isn't a surprise. We knew this was coming. And for some residents that I've spoken with, they said the same thing, like, what's going on? We're having community discussions, we're having surveys, but we haven't really made any forward progress. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. Again, I defer to the educational experts who are sitting here among us. But one of the things that pains me is when I think about what I've heard from our educational leaders of how desperate the situation is at Wilbraham Middle School, and we're going to accept that for another year. And that is, to me, that's not acceptable. We've known that. We've known it for a year. And we've basically, in the eyes of many people, we've just dragged our feet on this. And, you know, our job is to educate students. And if we find that a facility is inadequate, then it's our job to fix that. and to do it as expeditiously as possible. And we failed. And so next year, all of the problems that we're seeing at Wilbraham Middle School, the space being crowded, no library, we're just taking it for another year. It's disappointing. And I understand the administration's desire to make sure that when you move the 8th grade in here, it's done correctly. But we have to understand that there's a lot of moving parts in this district, and this is, it's not a good thing for our students.
I'll be the first, if I may, I'll be the first to, I always try to, what could I have done better? And as I just said, there were things I could do better, but the things that this committee has done, the planning committee has done better, I gotta say, is transparency. The information is out there, like all this information will be on the website. People can look at it, discuss it. We have been talking to the community. We've had several of these meetings. We have a lot of people that filled out the survey and have been giving the feedback. Getting the voices heard is very important, because getting this in a timely manner, like saying starting next year, there might be people out there that, whoa, I didn't get the memo on it yet. I haven't absorbed it all yet. And then will this happen? Will the vote go in our favor? I know in the past, you worry about something dragging on too long because opposition can build, but I think it has changed. I think it's changed between our two communities. I think Camden and Wilbraham, I think now it's the opposite. It's the longer time will help things and will help, not opposition, but what's the opposite of opposition? Support, thank you. That support, I think, would grow. I do want to say that we haven't talked about any of the temporary solutions that we could put into effect, because this is a new conversation for the middle school. And I would say that it could be perceived that there was dragging of feet, but I do not think that there was dragging of feet on this one.
I just want to clarify, and I'm basing on what Bill said, so are we definitely saying it's going to have to be put off, or are we just now starting to say there's a possibility that it might not be implemented in 24 or 25? I was, Bill reacted like, oh, it's definitely put off based on the speech he gave. So I just wondering, I would say that I totally understand with the complexity and everyone wanting to do it right, that we might not be sure if we're going to be successful implementing for 24, 25. But I would encourage to not slow down and just keep moving forward. And if it happens that it can't be done right, then I would be happy to accept that. I was just curious as to what you guys were saying.
One of the items that came up, we do have a select board member from each town, and the idea of getting another special town meeting set up and coordinated for January sounded like it would be very challenging. So there's already the October meeting for each town, the special town meeting, and then they have the May annual town meeting. But it sounded like getting a January meeting together would be very challenging, difficult, and costly. So it seemed unlikely. If that were the case, then we would be constrained on, we have some build-outs to do. There's all of those things that Aaron had talked about, how far out people were. We're not even guaranteed that we'd be able to have the work done in time for the school year, so.
Another thing I'd like to point out, that if you do watch these meetings, I think the four people, we have Terry Goodrich from Wilbraham, Don Davenport from Hamden, Michelle and I, there's no disagreement. The stuff that we're talking about, the process that we're doing, we are all on board. There was a question about, someone had said from Hamden that they were worried about losing their town identity if we had it K through 12 across the board, and it was Don Davenport that said something to the effect of, that's not the school committee's responsibility. The school committee's responsibility is to educate our children. He goes, me as the Board of Selectmen, that's my responsibility about town identity. That has nothing to do with what's happening here. And that was amazing. And he was very powerful on that. I was blown away. I mean, it's been going very well. Would you agree, Michelle?
I agree. And I think we've also been, trying our best to do our due diligence. All of these pieces, they've all taken time. So, over the summer, one of the tasks that we had given the superintendent and Aaron was to work with the building administrators and figure out, scheduling, capital expenses, and really looking into this to make sure that we have the most accurate numbers. And then also working with DESI, the fact that DESI was able to come, we had a representative come to our meeting in June, and then they were able to provide all of the feedback. I think that we're really making sure, we're trying our best to make sure that we are, working through this as methodically as we can, taking in all considerations, but some of the stuff does take time, and we want to make sure that we do it well, because like you said, we have one shot, and we want to make sure that it sticks and it's the best for our students.
So getting back to the middle school, we face another year where we have the challenges at that school. Do we have any plans? Do we have anything in the works for trying to accommodate students in the best way possible, knowing that based on the assessments of our administration that we have some real issues with the crowding in that school? And are there ways in which we can mitigate the impacts of that for that one bridge year?
I'll say that right now, the end of the last planning committee meeting was this discussion about will we be able, is it prudent for us to shoot for 24, 25, or 25, 26? And that was the beginning of the discussion, and we had that discussion, and that's what we just had here. We basically had over at that meeting. So I think it's very early. I think that by the next school committee meeting, we can have something for you on that. But I don't think that, I think with everything going on, with that coming down, us just digging into it, we will have to come up with a plan to help mitigate the middle school for that year. But it's not something that we really had time to dig into. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, the question was raised, if this, for instance, if it doesn't pass, what do we do then?
Right.
So kind of to go along with what you're saying is, what do we do? So even in the meantime, so we will certainly be having those discussions at our next planning meeting, which is, I don't have the date. Aaron, do you know the date of the next planning meeting?
Next meeting?
Yeah.
I don't think we said.
Oh, the 17th, October 17th at 5:30 in the IRC. Due to the holiday.
So the only thing I would say is right now, based on the documents that we've been provided, we still have 4 options on the table. I think the sooner we get closure on one specific target is going to be of the utmost importance. Because if we continue to float 4 options out there, then we really haven't closed the door on the discussion as far as which one we're going to do. So I think as, for planning committee, I would probably leave that to the top of the list to say, let's decide what we're going to do, because everything is going to hinge off of that, including how we are going to present that to the 2 towns. And this is going to require, and this goes all the way back to when we passed the 5-year plan back in 2018, 2017. And it was, you have to have open discussions. Once you decide on something, people are going to have their concerns and they're going to come out. The failure of the 5-year plan was strictly rested on the fact that the chair never had any public hearings, never had any meetings, and the public was completely in the dark. The first public meeting that we had was 5 days before the vote. So I'm urging us to find an option and then go with that option. We stand behind it, we vote on it, we're unified behind it, and then our messaging to the public has to be, this is based on what we have for constraints, this is the best option that we have. If we can modify the regional agreement and we can increase the educational opportunities for all students, And we have to make sure that we get that message out, and then when you have those public hearings, you can do it both in the specific towns as well as, you know, having a district-wide hearing. But I think that was the biggest failing that we had. And there really wasn't much different. If we're looking at all the stuff that we're doing right now, I said it before, we're digging up the same dirt that we did 6 years ago. And so, you know, this is, I think if we're going to do this, we have to make sure that we do it correctly, and that the public has the opportunity to ask those questions. Because the administration was asked questions that really involve sort of contingencies that they hadn't figured on. But if you have a series of meetings, then the administration has the ability to hear those concerns and respond and formulate a response, and then get that response out, which we didn't do. And I think that, you know, this is, the earlier we come to a decision about what we're going to do, the better off we're going to be in terms of messaging.
We have taken that to heart, by the way. We have really been, I guess, in Michelle, the administration, John, Aaron. I mean, it's that they really have been taking that to heart.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on. So Finance and Operations Subcommittee. Sean.
So at the last meeting, we already discussed this at our last meeting here, that we wanted to get a consultant to come in to assess our capital needs for Minnetonka. It was for all the schools, correct? Not just Minnetonka?
I thought it was for just
Minnetonka, okay. And because what it was right now, you know, who created this? It was you know, the principal and the administration, the janitorial staff, you know, the grounds, everybody was involved in creating this. And they thought that how the town had done a couple of years back when they did an assessment of every single building, that this building here being such a massive building with technology and everything like that, it would be important to have a third party come and say, these are the things that we think need to be done over the next 5 years, 10 years to keep Minnetonka and with a number on it. And then that way we can go to the town, and it has been suggested during the subcommittee, Budget and Finance Subcommittee meeting, that something would be done or should be done, you know, if we can get the town's buy-in, and this would be a good step on getting the town's buy-in to help us keep this building relevant over the next 10, 20 years.
So, if I remember correctly, the towns did their capital needs assessments for the buildings. They hired an outside consultant to do that. Their estimated cost of replacing the fire panel at Stony Hill was, I think, $5,000. The true cost came in over $30,000. I think I appreciate the idea that the consultant might create some leverage within the community to say, well, this was an outside consultant doing this. But at the same time, my fear is that if you bring in an outside consultant, we could end up with the same situation again, where they basically just underestimate what the true cost is going to be in that building, and then we got egg on our face because we look like we didn't know what we were doing. I think we have a very competent facilities crew here. I have no idea what we would pay for that, but unless we saw some incredible malfeasance on the part of our facilities people, just not being able to accurately estimate what the capital needs of the building are, I think we're just kind of throwing money away. I don't think I would say that's a wise use of our funds.
So I can address a few of the questions. I did ask Mike Messier to reach out to one of the engineers that we work with regarding what a capital needs assessment for this building would be. They believe would come to upwards of $30,000 to do a full capital needs assessment of this building. That would not include IT infrastructure. So, and IT infrastructure is a pretty big component of the capital plan. I spoke with Bill Powers today. He's going to see if he can think of anyone who might be able to give us an IT assessment. So, you know, I do see that there's a vote here. If it was something you wanted to vote, it would need to be, I would suggest doing the physical or non-IT related needs as one piece, and then the IT. It would also change sort of the bid schematics as well as we have to, when we bid it out, which is important. Yeah.
So I wanted to speak to Bill's comments, and I don't necessarily like the idea of spending money to just find out how much money we need to spend. But one thing that's been a big concern of mine for a few years is that I felt very strongly that there hasn't been enough planning for the saving of money for taking care of the capital needs of Minnetonka. And we saw that come to fruition because there were not funds to provide capital needs when the last town meeting happened. You know, we have a list of capital needs that have rolled over to the special meeting because they couldn't be funded if they didn't have the money. What's really good news is I think that both Hamden and Wilbraham Finance are actually beginning to embrace this concept and wanting to take seriously some plan to start saving money so that the money is there to take care of the capital needs of Minnetonka. You know, I'm concerned that, you know, I think that there's some people that would like to see this independent assessment done to validate the list of what the capital needs are for the voters, for the other members of the town that will need support of to get the voters' endorsement. But I'm also concerned that there are things missing from the list. And right now, the towns are open to this. And, you know, we talk about having, you know, one bite at the apple. I would like to see, you know, a real Minnetonka stabilization fund, whether, you know, it's on the school committee side, or I think it's much more likely will be on both Wilbraham and Hamden sides, so that the townspeople can continue to vote approval of the capital needs as they come through, that the money is there so that when there are capital needs, the towns are prepared to deal with it. So for that reason, I think that it is important that we get the independent assessments, and I also think we'd be wasting our time if we didn't include the IT infrastructure.
And keep in mind too,
Because this is a complicated bill.
keep in mind too, the one thing I have to say here is that we're not starting from zero. We already have the assessment that the administration has put together, and that will be presented to whoever comes on. So if they're thinking 5,000 and we have 30,000, I mean, I'm thinking that'll, you know, hopefully belay any kind of gross underestimation.
So the question that I would ask is, what is the particular problem that we're trying to solve? Because in the 8 years that I've been going on 9 years on this committee, I don't remember asking any of the member towns for significant capital needs for this building. It's not that we've been turned down, so we haven't asked. So to say that we need a consultant, and we're talking 30,000 for structural, how much for IT? You're talking a teacher's position. A teacher's position is a validated position of the committee with the voters that we haven't even tested the waters. We haven't even asked for the money. We've gone as far as presenting it to finance and have finance say, well, don't include it. So again, my response is going to be, it seems like a colossal waste of money to bring somebody in to tell us something that we already know. The facilities people in this town, in this building, know this building better than an outside consultant coming in. They're working in the best interest of the district. Have there been specific situations in this building where capital needs assessments, or capital needs have not been identified, or there have been significant cost overruns? And the answer is no, we haven't crossed that bridge yet. But I think it's incredibly premature to say that we're going to essentially spend money, as Mike said, We're gonna spend money to find out how much money we wanna spend, but we haven't even asked the voters if they support that.
So what we need to do is have respect for the way that municipal finance works in Wilbraham and in Hamden. Both of those towns fund almost the majority of capital projects through available free cash that has been certified from the previous year. That money gets spent every year. That money is not enough, okay? The free cash is going to be available in those towns. It's not enough to take care of the capital needs of Minnetonka that have come up. In a few years, we've got a list of like $4 million of expenses. And the towns, I think it's wonderful that the towns are being open-minded enough to start seriously preparing for the expenses that are going to be necessary to keep this building state-of-the-art, to keep it as the centerpiece of our school district and a wonderful resource for our students. But they're asking for our help to prepare for that. And the way that the towns do it is they do the independent assessments. They get it on all the town buildings, and that helps them guide what their needs are going to be. But the available free cash is not going to be enough to take care of this building over the next 5 years. And so I think that it's important that we work with the towns to help start the process for having a fund that has the actual amount of money in it that's going to be needed. Otherwise, you say we didn't ask. The school committee did ask for the capital needs for this building. And they said, got worse than no, we got don't ask.
Human building by the voters rather than
It never got to the voters.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get the voters' approval without the vetting through the town.
The one thing I do want to add is that if you remember, I don't remember which meeting it was, we had everyone from the towns around the table. And I asked, what is the stabilization fund that Minnetonka has, that the school committee has for Minnetonka, the district has for Minnetonka? What is that fund supposed to be used for? And the discussion around the table was, you should use that to put together the plans, get the quotes together, get the assessments done, to present it to the towns that this is how much things would cost. And this would be in line. We're not going to be taking any money away from the teachers. We would be taking it out of the stabilization fund that we have for this building to do this assessment.
So I think we're conflating two different issues here. We're conflating the idea of hiring an outside consultant to provide us with a list of capital needs for this building as the one issue, and the second issue is the viability of the stabilization fund. Right? There's no argument, I don't think, among any members of this committee that that fund is woefully inadequate for the needs of this building. The question is, do we need to spend an additional $30,000 to bring somebody in to tell us basically what we already know? Is that a wise use of money? Whether or not we're taking $30,000 out of the stabilization fund or not, the question is there a record in this building or in any of our buildings that show that our facilities people have inadequately planned for the capital needs of the buildings? Because if the answer is yes, then I'm going to say, okay, that an outside consultant would be a good idea. But so far, I haven't seen any evidence of that. We've seen the capital needs of all of the buildings being accurately identified and responsibly slated in a schedule, on a calendar, knowing that those things would be held, we would have to do those things down the road. Now, with regards to spending the money for planning, etc., like I said, I look at that as more of structural type planning, architect's fees, things like that. I don't look at it in terms of just hiring a consultant. If there's a specific need that we have in the district, then again, I ask the question, what is the problem we're trying to solve? The problem we're trying to solve is we have capital needs of this building that need to be met, and we don't have a fund for that. So why would we spend more money to tell people, to have somebody come in and tell us exactly what we know, And then we're right back in the beginning where we have to go back to the voters to say, okay, these are the capital needs of the building. This is why we need the funding for it. Now, if we want to take the money, if we want the two towns to proportionally pitch in the money for the consultant because they feel that that would be, that would be helpful as leverage for the voters, I'm okay with that. I don't like the idea of just taking money out of the stabilization fund on the, on the idea that, well, maybe it'll have more validity if somebody else says it.
It's not just the validity of someone else saying that. It's right now we have our team and they say, here are our needs. And someone will be able to come in here who has done this, who has experienced with this and say, no, this is more important. You need to do this first. No, don't put that off for later because it's going to cause this problem, that problem, that problem. There's all kinds of expertise. That's why the towns did it. The town had their own assessments as well. And then people came in and they opened their eyes up of the town to the different buildings and the more immediate needs and needs that you could put off for a little while longer. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to hire a consultant to assess the capital needs votes with the funds coming out of the Minnetonka Stabilization Fund.
I would like to second that motion.
Any other comments or further discussion? One comment that I would like to make is I don't know that it had come up, we brought it up, or it was suggested that the towns pitch in, to your point. I don't know that that was brought up and whether the towns would be willing to do that, I don't know.
I think they'll probably feel they already did in the form of the funds that are currently in the Minnetonka stabilization.
And another point I'd like to make is I think it's also to make sure that we're not missing anything, that there's not anything that somehow got missed or that has, come up between the last time that they did their assessment to whenever the consultant comes in, just to make sure that we are planning properly.
So we currently pay people on facilities, correct? So
yes. I'm just.
I would counter that with just saying, we could easily ask them to say, look, can you go back, reassess your capital needs for the building, did you miss anything?
I'm generally consultant averse, but the question is, do we have somebody, I'm not an expert on with buildings, but do you have a facility manager? That's the same thing. And if you did have a consultant, it would seem like the facilities manager should be right with that person, so he learns things that if he's missing anything. Do we have a facilities manager that's on top of it already and has a tentative list?
We have a director of facilities, yes.
Does he have a tentative list? Because normally...
That's our capital, we have a 10-year capital plan that exists, yes.
So all this, so he's going to have to go talk to the consultant and bring the consultant up to the snuff on what we've already got, and then the consultant just kind of walk around to see if he can find some other things we're missing.
Yep.
That's the thought.
Is everybody here agrees with the consultant?
Well, we're going to vote now and see what people think. All right, so we'll do a roll call vote. Okay, Bill.
No.
Cheryl. No. Sean.
Yes.
Lisa. Consulting or no consulting?
Let's come back to you.
Yes, please. Rich.
I don't abstain right now because I don't have enough information to make an educated decision.
Yes.
Lisa.
What's the count right now?
Yes. So it's what, 2 to 3.
You have to vote.
No.
So the vote fails. It's 3 versus 3. You need 4 in order to.
So we can just take a vote.
Do you want to change your
So
mind?
change your mind? No? Do
You don't have enough information to say yes. I think it's better off saying no now. And if there's somebody has that list and says that we need a consultant to,
The list, it's in your,
Oh,
it's in, you should
then,
have it in your.
so the consultant just,
We reviewed it last time.
Yeah.
okay, so right now, I'm still gonna leave it where it stays.
Do you think it's possible to have it as a future agenda item, maybe if we have actual costs from actual consultants as to what their fees would be for both infrastructure
So
and IT?
we can't put this out to bid until we have a source of funding. I've given an estimate, it would be upwards of 30,000 exclusive of the IT infrastructure needs. And I'm working on getting some rough numbers for that.
So the one question that I would ask, I know it's a little late, the vote has been taken, but have you guys talked to Mike and like our facilities guys?
I mean, that is how our 10-year capital plan is created.
No, I'm saying, have you talked to them about this? You're talking about hiring somebody to basically check their work.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, in their mind, if it's the will of the committee to do that, that's what we'll do. They're not. It's not upsetting to them to have someone do it. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some monkey's paw to it as well. You know, I would not work with someone we couldn't work hand in hand with. So if we were to do this, you know, I think it's really important, especially looking at the numbers, as you alluded to, Bill, in the town's capital needs assessment. So I can think of a number of them that were off by large orders of magnitude relative to what we're paying, what we would have paid then and now pay now. So I think it would be really fair for us to work with those people hand in hand. But they may bring up. I mean, they're going to look very intimately at life cycles, right? So they're going to look at, you know, 20 years you got to replace the roof. Period. There's not going to be as much looking at the history, and once that's built, it's built, right? So we're pushing things down the road. We're looking at, is the roof still good? We're checking the roof. Mike and Dave are on the roof constantly, right? They know the conditions the roof's in. They're gauging it as they go. We get something from a consultant. They're looking at it once. They're getting a snapshot. They're not getting a life cycle view of things. I mean, we can put some life cycle view on it as it goes, and it would be a dynamic plan, but I think it may end up being surprising, particularly when we get to the IT needs. I think that's, I think as I've shared, you know, most of the infrastructure in this building is, you know, well past its recommended life, and many of the items we couldn't warranty anymore. We cannot warranty anymore.
Can you just clarify when was the capital needs list last done?
We worked on it over the summer. So we were in every building, every school this summer, with principals, with head custodians, with Dave Rogers, who's a certified HVAC technician, Mike, who's got, you know, the years he has with the district, knows the buildings inside and out, walked all of those buildings. Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else? We will move on to the LPVET collaborative representative, Lisa.
We didn't have a forum, so we can have a meeting.
Okay, great. Negotiation subcommittee, nothing.
Before you move on to that, there will be a LPVEC, not the collaborative, but the corporation meeting on, I believe it's October 18th.
Okay, we'll put you back on. Nothing for negotiations at this time. Has policy subcommittee met yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. Technology subcommittee.
Nothing yet.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to the superintendent's update.
Thank you. Directing your attention to the equity improvement plan in the packet. Tonight, I'm pleased to present this 3-year equity improvement plan. The strategic plan called for both an equity audit and a 3-year improvement plan to address issues identified through the audit. The district DEI and leadership teams have been working hard to develop this strategy document to address the key findings of the equity audit. I was hoping that we were going to have some members of that team. Well, we do have some members of the leadership team present tonight, so thank you for your help with all of that. Let me also say that research on equity work says that it takes a minimum of 10 years to deeply embed equity in the fabric of the district. So this seems to be kind of a theme of a lot of the things in the strategic plan, are a lot, and I'm hoping for a result really quickly. So I think we should think of this as sort of the first step or the next step on our equity journey rather than the thing that's going to get us to the end. Also thinking about, 10 years, it's an extremely long-term project, but this will definitely bring some improvements. So this plan includes 41 action steps. As you can see from the column entitled also in the strategic plan, that approximately 40% of the action steps in this are similar to, or identical to steps that were already in the strategic plan, so that helps a little bit. But as a practical matter, it means that we still have more than 20 additional implementation steps to put into place over the next 3 years, in addition to all of the steps that are already in the strategic plan. So there's a lot of work, but it'll be good work. Year one focuses on MTSS and bullying prevention and school improvement planning. So I think it's appropriate that we're introducing it during the National Bullying Prevention Awareness Month. And I also hope that this will be the month that I introduce our first documented MTSS implementation plan to the school community. I was on a call with principals earlier today, and they are doing so much work to get MTSS off the ground. You're going to be proud of what I have to bring next time. So the good part is that was already in the strategic plan, so some of this equity work is already far down the line because of MTSS. And also, anti-bullying has been a part of the district policies for a long time. So that is work that was also ongoing. Year two of the plan focuses on deepening the culture of data literacy within the district and clarifying the vision of equity. In year three, the focus shifts to inclusive hiring practices and improved communication. So from now on, my monthly updates will focus not only on progress that's being made under the strategic plan, but also progress that's being made under the equity improvement plan. And as you can see, in some cases, we'll be doing what I call twofers, of things that are included in both strategic and equity improvement. So happy to bring that to you. Moving on to the enrollment report, our October 1st count was 2,846, which is 14 fewer students than we had last year. Not much more to say about that. So let me talk about transportation. At our last meeting, I reported that transportation services were off to a smoother start this year as compared to last year. To quantify that, I looked back at a report that I had given at the first October meeting last year. There's a slightly different number of days, but normalizing it to the first 19 days of the school year, we had sent 34 messages concerning delayed routes, some of which were up to 20 minutes late arriving at school. Through the first 19 days of this school year, we sent 24 messages. And a lot of those were shorter, and a lot of those were afternoon routes, so it's still an inconvenience, but not as much of an impact on education. So that's good progress, but we still have a way to go and still work with the collaborative on a daily basis on hammering things out with routes. We do have one route that's been especially vexing this year. You may have heard about bus 32 in Hamden, which was continued to be impacted by delays both in the morning and in the afternoon. As of this morning, we removed 20 students from that bus, put them on a different route, so hope that will bring some relief to everyone who was involved. But I do want to say, do have a special concern for families on that route, because many of these other 24 calls were one route, one day, one route, another day, and so they weren't much of an impact. In fact, one of the issues that's come up is feelings of inequity between the towns, because Wilbraham parents have been praising the buses this year, and that's really hard for the riders of bus 32 to hear. So we want to get that on the same kind of a footing. I just want to close this piece with a principal's words. I was meeting with the collaborative last week on transportation issues, and this principal happened to text me at the time and said, be sure to tell them, I'm delighted with how fast the bus routes became normalized and how tight the schedules are. It makes a big difference that all kids are consistently here on time and not waiting in the afternoon. So as you can see, still some issues to work out, but it is a lot better. So some issues have been raised about buses observed to be idle across from Rice's Farm and in Hamden. Let me just say, this is something I've had to speak to whenever I've worked with tiered transportation systems, and they're actually a good thing. Because whenever possible, you want to have a buffer between the time when buses complete their first route and the time they start their second route. When runs are so tight that they have to immediately begin the next route right after dropping off students, you can have a cascading effect where a student late on the first route makes the bus late to drop off at the first school, and because there's no built-in buffer time, that is late for everyone else down the line. So ideally, you want to have a first route completed and then some downtime for buses. So that's what people are seeing. If you see empty buses sitting in parking lots or sitting across from Rice's Farm, it means they're running on time. It means they dropped the students off when they were supposed to, and now they're waiting to start the second route so that they don't arrive too early. So just to explain why that's happening. And then finally, I'd encourage anyone who's still experiencing transportation problems to contact my office directly. I know a lot of folks have been trying to be in communication with the bus company, but it really is helpful for me if I can know what's happening so that I can have direct conversations with the executive director. So please feel free to let us be your contact for the bus company with that. And that's my report.
Could you please put the equity improvement plan up on the website?
Happy to.
And is there a place on the website that if people have busing issues that they can go to, type something in so it does go to you?
I don't think on the website, I would say if people want to send a written response, email is the best way to do that. And my email address is on the website.
Okay, great, thank you.
Today, I had my first complaint. My neighbor, maybe it's Route 32, but the complaint said, it's always been late. But today was 15 minutes early, and a lot of people missed the bus because the kids were out 15 minutes early. So, anyway, that didn't Okay, but whatever. So she's trying to get together with all the other moms, and they got a little chat group that when one person gets on a bus, they're reporting where the bus is. And then I was told that you have a transponder that's going to be at least, she said, why can't we look on a website or something to see where the bus is so we have an idea when our kid's going to be out there. And I think Michelle told me in January this is going to happen.
That's correct. It'll be sort of like Lyft. You can see the bus coming.
Where it is, which will be good.
Yeah.
And the other thing is with bullying, is that, I know you use our software, and we've always had a big bullying feature where you can at least, as long as you're putting in discipline incidents, you track who's bullying, who's bullying, you can always get a report and see who's been involved in those incidents, who's our top bully in the school, who's our top victim in the school, because that might happen through a number of different incidents. So if you're using that, you said something that can happen right away, to try to identify that, then you can also get all kinds of reports on demographics and other things based on bullying reports. And that's for all the schools that use that.
And that is a part of the equity improvement plan. So
they can start using it like today, like yesterday.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I just want to say, John, just great job on this. I'm really happy with the positive things that you put into this plan, and I think it's going to lift everyone in the district up. So thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, we'll move on to the Assistant Superintendent of Finance, Operations, and Human Resources.
Alrighty. So you have financial report and the new memo. The memo highlights 3 items that I'm keeping an eye on right now. The first is line 1430. That is legal services. I think a number of people are aware of some legal situations that have arisen. I fully expect us to be well over budget on legal this year, given some of that and ongoing. So we are right around halfway spent for our legal budget so far this year. And that does not include current billings that may not be reflected on there. So, you know, they do the work and then they bill us and we get the bill after they've done the work. So that's a line I'm going to continue watching. There's not a lot we can do about it in many cases, but we're going to try to just keep our eye on where it is during the year. Call out 2357 that shows over budget. We did a lot of PD and curricular work this summer. A lot of it had to do with items in the strategic plan that we committed to having take place. So, you know, that is a line that we expect to be over budget. We do have other lines that will be under budget, so we expect you know, that will be absorbed. Finally, I did a little more research on the electric line, just to look at what things look like. As you can see, when you take actual and encumbered, which is more or less an estimate of where we're going to end the year, it represents a 40% increase over last year. I did budget for a 10% increase in all of our electrical costs, knowing the costs were going up, and I did factor for the lighting issues. So I tried to, you know, play with the numbers a little bit relative to what fiscal 19 looked like prior to the lighting issue. Some good news though is our first few, we get multiple invoices related to our electrical, particularly for, and the biggest factor in this is the Minnetonka building right now. We get invoices that reflect electrical usage from 2 separate solar facilities. So we have one in Great Barrington, one in Belchertown that we pay into. Then we have our standard electric providers. So between 3 and I think even a 4th that plays into the total cost. But when I looked at the 2 solar providers that I was able to pull out cleanly, our actual costs this year so far are less, and that represents the biggest encumbrance we have. So you'll see there's a solar offset in a lot of our electric bills, but we do pay into those solar farms to be part of that. So we're paying a number of different players in a number of different ways. Our solar bills, which are our most significant bills, were lower the first 2 of this year, and those represent periods in which things like air conditioning was on and things like that. So those are usually some of our higher bills. So I'm hopeful that that total will not be as high as we're reflecting. And then finally, overall, I did compare last year's to this year's, where we were roughly October 1st. It does seem like we're at a somewhat slower burn rate, which is helpful. We do have some sort of revolving vacancies. We are filling some vacancies, but we were in the same position last year, if you'll recall. We had a number of vacancies that we were still trying to fill well into the year. So I'm hopeful that, you know, maybe we'll have a little bit slower burn rate, and, you know, the electrical will come out okay overall. It's still very early, so I don't want to, you know, jinx anything quite yet. And then finally, I do want to sort of use this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about where we're going to be in fiscal 25. Fiscal 25 has been something I've been talking about for a while as more or less a financial precipice for us. We will, ESSER funds end this year, so we've been offsetting the budget with about $350,000 of ESSER funds for the past couple of years to make the budget work. Additionally, the school committee has increased E&D utilization by $400,000 in this time, and school choice by $200,000 in this time. So, you know, I don't know where that's going to leave us, but that's a pretty big gap kind of leading in this early. So just something to think about as we're moving forward. I just want to make sure that those numbers are clear as we eventually move into budget season. Any questions, thoughts?
Could we take this memorandum and put it inside the folder for the Budget and Finance Subcommittee?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the memo.
Hmm?
Thanks for the memo.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's honestly a little bit easier for me now that I think about it. Oh, yes, we can move on to that. I apologize. So you have a memo regarding student activities, and I have it here. This is really just closing out some, where did I put it? Sorry. My apologies. Oh, here it is. My apologies. Right under what I thought it was under. So we regularly look at student activities accounts, and ideally this is something we would have done in the spring into the summer. But it was brought to my attention that we have a few student activities accounts that are relatively defunct, and it would make sense to consolidate those funds into other accounts. So close down those accounts, given that there's no activity and there won't be any activity, and move those funds. So the first is the Celebrate Life account. That was established in 2011-2012. It was dissolved in 2022-23. There's a balance of $51.50. We are recommending that that transfers to the Student Enrichment account. The Eco Club was established in 2012-2013. It was dissolved in 2017-2018. That account has $1,075.48. That we would transfer to the Student Enrichment account as well. One Act Plays, we're not sure when that was established, so my apologies, but that was dissolved in fiscal 22-23. That has $566.82, and the intent would be to transfer that to the Drama Club, which has, sort of similar goals, and that's what you try to do with the money when you can. The Student Enrichment account, just for the record, is established for the purpose of supporting participation in school events where a student may not have the financial means to do so. So that would be supportive of our equity mission. So my recommendation would be for the school committee to authorize the closing of those accounts and dispersing the funds in the manner indicated.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. We'll move on to public comment. Is there anyone here that would like to make a public comment? Okay, we will move on. Consent agenda.
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 7-0. And then we have the donation. Oh, we don't have to do that. Okay, perfect. So old business. So there's the draft of the HWRSD calendar for the 24-25 school year. We reviewed that at the last meeting, so we are going to vote on that this evening. Do you have anything to add?
No changes?
We did make a couple of changes based on feedback. We tried to move some professional development days that were right after vacation weeks farther down so that we could at least get some solid weeks in. So it's taking that into account, but it's substantially the same.
Okay. May I add a motion?
Make a motion to approve the draft calendar for 2024-2025.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much.
I have a question, and I know I'm a little late in getting my question in, so I don't expect a vote or anything, but I was just thinking with the Celebrate Life and the Eco Club, if there was any way legally we could take that money and make it available to those children at middle school who can't afford going to Washington, D.C.
Unfortunately, those are high school accounts. Those are high school student accounts. It's not funds that we could make available for that purpose. Sorry.
I would add that John is working with the vendor to try to increase the number of scholarships. We do also have some other financial concepts that we're going to work with to try to make it as accessible to as many students as possible.
Is there anything that anyone would like to add to future agenda items? Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Roll call vote. Bill?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yeah.
Sean?
Aye.
Lisa? Aye.
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Myself, aye. We are adjourned at 8:45.
There are, if people can sign warrants, please, that would be fantastic.